"If you walk out now, don't come back," he warned. She paused at the door and whispered, "I already left the moment you lied." She came to the city with a small suitcase and a big, naive heart. She was a good girl, not innocent in the childish sense, but clean in her intentions. She believed in people. She believed in love. And most of all, she believed in him. The city welcomed her with noise, cold streets, and promises whispered at night. He was a guide through this chaos, confident, charming, already shaped by the city's rough hands. He told her she was special, that she was different from the others. She trusted him enough to follow, enough to soften herself where she should have stayed guarded. But cities change people faster than love can protect them. The betrayal didn't come loudly. It came quietly, dressed as concern and smiles. His new friend appeared suddenly, bold, polished, knowing exactly how to play her role. Together, they cornered her, twisted the truth, and placed the blame neatly into her hands. Words were used like weapons. Trust was used like bait. She lost more than love. She lost her reputation, her sense of safety, her belief that being good was enough. For a while, she broke. She cried in rented rooms, stared at unfamiliar ceilings, and blamed herself for not seeing the signs. The city didn't care. It never does. But something inside her hardened. She learned to speak up. She learned when silence was no longer dignity. She cut ties, walked away, and rebuilt herself piece by piece, not as the girl who arrived, but as a woman who survived. He stayed behind with his lies and his shallow victories. She moved forward. The city that once swallowed her became the place where she found her spine. She was still good. Still simple. Just no longer easy to break. She didn't leave the city. That surprised even her. Instead, she stayed and watched it differently. No more illusions, no more soft focus. She saw how people traded bodies, loyalty, and words like cheap currency. She saw how easily affection turned transactional, how quickly promises rotted when comfort was threatened. She worked hard, jobs that didn't care about her past or her tears. Late nights, early mornings, tired hands, and a sharp mind waking up. Independence tasted bitter at first, but then addictive. No one owned her time anymore. No one spoke for her. Sometimes she ran into them. He avoided her eyes. His new girl didn't. She looked her up and down with that same practiced smile, the one that pretended victory but smelled of insecurity. They were together, but something about them felt hollow, stitched together with jealousy and convenience. For the first time, the girl who once trusted too much felt nothing. No rage. No longing. Just clarity. She understood then. The worst part of betrayal isn't the pain. It's the way it teaches you who people really are. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. She started choosing herself with a quiet cruelty. Saying no without explanations. Leaving without apologies. Letting people earn her softness instead of handing it out like a gift. Love didn't disappear from her life. It just stopped being blind. One night, walking alone through streets that once scared her, she realized the city no longer felt hostile. It felt honest. Rough, flawed, alive, just like her now. She had been broken here. But she had also been rebuilt. Not into someone colder. Into someone stronger. And if love ever came back, real love, it would meet a woman who knew her worth, her limits, and exactly how much she could survive. Time passed, and with it came a strange kind of freedom. She stopped measuring her life by what had been taken from her and started noticing what had quietly grown in its place. Confidence. Boundaries. Desire that belonged only to her, not shaped by anyone else's expectations. She learned how to enjoy her body without apology, how to feel attractive without needing to be chosen. Men noticed. Of course they did. The city always notices women who walk differently. But now she saw through them, the ones who wanted to possess, the ones who wanted to save, the ones who wanted to use her strength as decoration. She let some of them close, just close enough to remind herself she was alive, wanted, dangerous in her own way. No promises. No lies. Just moments that ended when she decided. And that was power. Sometimes, late at night, memories crept in. His voice, the way she once softened at his touch, the girl she had been when she believed love meant endurance. Those thoughts no longer hurt. They felt distant, almost foreign, like reading someone else's diary. She understood now. Betrayal hadn't ruined her. It had stripped her down to the truth. She was no longer trying to be good in a way that pleased others. She was good to herself, and ruthless with anyone who mistook her kindness for weakness. One evening, standing alone on a balcony overlooking the city lights, she smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because nothing owned her anymore. Not the past. Not him. Not the shame they tried to dress her in. She had arrived here as a simple girl with trust in her eyes. She stayed as a woman who knew exactly what she deserved. And if the city ever tried to break her again, it would find her ready. She began to understand something else too. Survival changes your appetite. Not just for food or money, for life itself. She wanted depth now. Truth. Skin without masks. Conversations that didn't dissolve by morning. And when she didn't find that, she preferred solitude to cheap closeness. The city tested her again, of course. It always does. Old rumors resurfaced, half-truths whispered by people who never bothered to ask her side. Once, that would have shattered her. Now, she met it with a calm stare and a spine made of steel. She no longer needed to explain herself to those committed to misunderstanding her. And then, one evening, she saw him again, truly saw him. He looked smaller somehow. Tired. His confidence felt rehearsed, like a line repeated too many times. He tried to speak to her, tried to rewrite the past with nostalgia and regret. He said her name the way he used to, expecting it to still open doors. It didn't. She listened politely, silently. And when he finished, she smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just honestly. "You lost me," she said. Nothing more. She walked away, heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation at the end of a sentence that had been finished long ago. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't drink. She didn't replay memories in her head. She slept deeply, peacefully, as someone who had finally closed a chapter without tearing the pages. She knew now. Being betrayed had forced her to meet herself, stripped of illusions, raw, real. And she liked the woman she had become. Not perfect. Not untouched. But whole. The city lights burned outside her window, restless as ever. And she stood among them, no longer lost, no longer afraid. A woman who had been tested, marked, and still chose herself. She stopped romanticizing pain after that. Healing, she learned, wasn't poetic. It was repetitive. Boring, even. Waking up and choosing herself again and again. Paying bills. Saying no. Letting go of people who felt familiar but wrong. Strength didn't arrive in one dramatic moment. It settled in quietly, like a habit. There were nights she missed being reckless. Missed the girl who loved without armor. But she understood now that innocence lost isn't meant to be recovered. It's meant to be replaced with wisdom. She built a life that didn't need witnesses. A small apartment that felt like hers. Music she chose for herself. Mornings without anxiety. She laughed more, real laughter, not the kind used to hide fear. And sometimes, when desire stirred, she allowed it without guilt. Wanting didn't make her weak. It made her human. People from her past faded into background noise. Including him. Especially him. One day she realized she no longer told her story as a tragedy. It had become a transformation. Not something that happened to her, but something she walked through. She had been betrayed, yes. But she had also learned discernment. She had been humiliated, but she had learned self-respect. And standing there, in the same city that once swallowed her whole, she finally understood. She didn't escape the city. She outgrew it. And whatever came next, love, solitude, success, desire, it would come on her terms. Because she was no longer the girl who arrived with a suitcase and hope. She was the woman who stayed, and chose herself anyway. And still, her story didn't end there. Growth has a strange way of inviting new tests, quieter ones, subtler. The kind that don't break you, but ask whether you've truly learned. New faces entered her life. People who admired her strength, who were drawn to the calm confidence she now wore so naturally. Some wanted to borrow it. Some wanted to challenge it. A few wanted to earn it. She watched carefully. She no longer rushed toward affection like a thirsty traveler. She let time do its work. Let people reveal themselves in pauses, in disappointments, in moments when no one was watching. Trust became something built, not given. And then there was someone different. Not dramatic. Not loud. No grand speeches or promises. Just consistency. Respect. The ability to listen without trying to fix or own her. He didn't try to save her, and that was exactly why she felt safe. She didn't fall quickly. She didn't fall blindly. She stepped forward, fully awake. For the first time, love didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like presence. Like being seen without being reduced. Desired without being consumed. And if it ended someday, she knew she would survive that too. Because the most important relationship in her life was no longer romantic. It was the one she had built with herself, patient, honest, unbreakable. The city kept moving. People kept betraying, loving, leaving. Nothing about the world softened. But she had. Not into weakness, into balance. She had learned how to be gentle without being naive. Open without being exposed. Strong without being cruel. And that was her quiet victory. A good, simple girl had come to the city once. A woman who knew her worth remained. And this time, nothing could take that from her. Years later, she barely recognized the girl she used to be. Not with shame, but with tenderness. She understood now that goodness had never been her weakness. It had only been unprotected. And experience hadn't corrupted her, it had refined her. Like fire does, not destroying, but reshaping. She began telling her story sometimes. Not for sympathy, not for validation, but because other women listened with that quiet intensity that comes from recognition. They saw themselves in her pauses, in the places where her voice slowed. She never painted herself as a victim. She spoke as someone who had walked through something ugly and come out awake. And that mattered. The city still tested her, still offered shortcuts disguised as comfort, still whispered old temptations late at night. But she no longer confused intensity with intimacy, or chaos with passion. She had learned that peace could be just as intoxicating. Sometimes she stood at busy intersections and watched people rush past, each carrying their own private wounds and hopes. She felt connected to them in a way she never had before, not because she needed them, but because she understood them. She didn't need revenge. Life had already handled that. The man who betrayed her became a lesson she rarely thought about. The woman who helped him disappeared into irrelevance. Not because they were punished, but because they no longer had access to her inner world. And that was the real consequence. She kept living, loving carefully, laughing freely, choosing herself daily. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. Her story was never about falling apart. It was about learning how not to abandon herself again. And in a city that once tried to break her, she walked on, whole, grounded, and finally at home within herself. And even that wasn't the end. Life, she discovered, doesn't close chapters neatly. It layers them. Old themes return in new forms, asking softer questions now. Not will you survive, but will you stay true? There were moments when comfort tempted her to shrink, to accept less because it was easy, to silence her instincts to keep the peace. Each time, she paused. Each time, she chose herself again, not out of defiance, but out of respect. She learned how to leave rooms without drama, how to say goodbye without burning bridges or begging for closure, how to forgive without reopening doors. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't reconciliation. It was release. On quiet mornings, she drank her coffee slowly, sunlight touching the wall she had chosen, the life she had built. No audience. No proof required. Peace felt earned, not given. When love came, sometimes, it came gently. When it left, sometimes, it left cleanly. Nothing shattered her anymore. She bent, adjusted, and kept her shape. The city still roared. Still glittered. Still lied when it felt like it. But she moved through it with an internal compass that never wavered. She trusted herself now. Fully. Fiercely. If anyone asked who she was, she no longer answered with a story of pain or triumph. She answered with presence. With the way she stood. With the calm certainty in her eyes. She had been a good, simple girl once. She had been hurt. She had been tested. And now, she was something rarer. A woman who knew exactly who she was, and refused to lose herself for anything or anyone again. And with that certainty came a quieter courage. She stopped needing turning points. No more dramatic awakenings, no final scenes meant to prove anything. Her strength lived in small, almost invisible choices. Who she let close, what she tolerated, where she invested her time. Power, she learned, didn't have to announce itself. There were evenings when the city felt heavy again. Rain on asphalt, neon bleeding into puddles, the old ache of remembering who she had been when everything was new. But nostalgia no longer tricked her into going backward. She could miss the past without wanting it back. She became selective with her energy. Generous, yes, but precise. She gave warmth where there was honesty, distance where there was manipulation. And she no longer felt guilty for that balance. People sensed it. Some were drawn to her calm like a refuge. Others felt exposed by it and stepped away. She let both happen. Not everyone is meant to stay. One day, almost without noticing, she realized she was happy. Not euphoric. Not intoxicated by dreams. Just steady. Grounded. At ease in her own skin. The kind of happiness that doesn't need witnesses or explanations. She had learned the difference between loneliness and solitude, and chose the latter whenever necessary. She had learned that love should add to your life, not consume it. And most importantly, she had learned to trust the quiet voice inside her, the one she once ignored. The city had taken much from her once. But in return, it had given her herself. And wherever she went next, whether she stayed or eventually left, she knew this truth would travel with her. She would never again betray herself to be loved. In the end, nothing dramatic marked her victory. No applause. No confession. No moment where the city suddenly softened its edges for her. Life simply continued, and she continued with it, standing steady inside her own choices. She understood now that closure isn't something others give you. It's something you take the moment you stop asking why and start asking what next. The past lost its grip when it stopped defining her decisions. She walked the same streets where she once felt small, but they no longer recognized her as prey. She had learned how to look forward without rushing, how to stand still without fear. Love no longer felt like a test she had to pass. It felt like an option, welcome, but never necessary for her worth. If she loved again, it would be freely. If she stood alone, it would be proudly. She had forgiven, not because they deserved it, but because she deserved peace. And peace, she learned, was the most radical form of freedom. Once, she came to the city with hope and a suitcase. She stayed through betrayal, loss, and awakening. And now, she lived, not as a survivor clinging to strength, but as a woman who trusted herself completely. Her story didn't end with pain. It ended with truth. And that was enough. That was the end of the story. Stay with me until we meet again.